what your expectation should be for your agent in terms of understanding construction about a house, about the outside the house, understanding repairs, understanding the cost of things, understanding how to negotiate repairs. I think it's really important for the real estate agent of today to actually understand this stuff. There's really no excuse. You can go online, you can find anything about anything. At our team, we talk a ton about construction. We talk about, like, I literally quiz the agents on like what things are. There are a lot of agents out there that I don't think even know what certain components are of a house. They'll say like, hey, the client will say, hey, what's that? And they're like, yeah, well, that looks like this, and they'll kind of fudge it. This is really important. This is important for the consumer. We want to put people into homes safely. We want to put people into homes with all the knowledge. But now, it's not super common in Philadelphia, but we're starting to do inspections and negotiations. Welcome back to another episode of Moving Sucks. I'm your host, Seth. Wanted to get on here and talk today about construction and what your expectation should be for your agent in terms of understanding construction about a house, about the outside the house, understanding repairs, understanding the cost of things, understanding how to negotiate repairs, whether to have something fixed before settlement, what's like scary and should definitely be fixed then, or what can be fixed later. Now, to make it very clear, anything is able to be fixed. Almost literally anything. Unless you have some kind of like massive environmental issue that's bubbling up from the earth. So at our team, we talk a ton about construction. We talk about like I literally quiz the agents on like what things are. There are a lot of agents out there that I don't think even know what certain components are of a house. They'll say like, hey, the client will say, hey, what's that? And they're like, yeah, well, that looks like this, and they'll kind of fudge it. And we actually take a lot of secondary clients, meaning they were with an agent. They realized that agent didn't actually understand what was going on, what things were, and they just didn't feel comfortable because we work with a lot of first-time home buyers. So there are a lot of agents out there who actually don't know kind of what the things are in the house. And listen, there are things even now I get tripped up by, especially in older homes, because there were no like rules back then. There were no permits. Like people just put stuff into their house. And then eventually they put the permitting process together. Like 50s and 60s, that's when things started to become more boilerplate. Now it's like things are very, very regulated. So it's very easy to see what things are in newer homes. But you go into homes that are built before the World War II, and we get into some choppy waters. There's some stuff in basements, stuff that's buried in the backyard, modifications, all kinds of stuff. And that's fair. I mean, if there are wonky things in a property, you're not supposed to know exactly what everything is, and that's what you bring in professionals for. But there is an enormous lack of education in our industry about what is in homes, how to talk about homes. Honestly, there's not a whole lot of talk about negotiation. There is not a lot of talk about the value of construction projects or return on investment on improvements or renovations. And I think it's really important for the real estate agent of today to actually understand this stuff. There's really no excuse. You can go online, you can find anything about anything to coach you up if there is a property that is going to be, potentially dicey in terms of like weird things. You should know what a heat pump is, and you should know how sump pumps work and what a battery backup means and what a water backup on a sump pump means. Because this is important. This is really important. This is important for the consumer. We want to put people into homes safely. We want to put people into homes with all the knowledge. But now, it's not super common in Philadelphia, but we're starting to do inspections and negotiations. And even if you hire an agent who understands construction, it's really hard to negotiate when the listing agent or the buyer's agent, the counterpart, doesn't get it. And what it does, that stops deals that should actually go through. Deals should go through. And there are agents out there that have a lot of experience, a lot of years under their belt. Some don't believe that that's their job. To something that's a liability. Some agents never even go on inspections, and they sit there and they say, well, no, this is a liability because if we give them wrong information, they could come back and sue us, sue our brokerage. I think that's nonsense. I think that there's more of a liability in not going. It's like, how could you not tell us about this stuff and you just let us just interpret all this, from the inspector, and we have no idea what to do. But you cannot you cannot negotiate a deal for real estate from afar. You got to get in there. You got to go to the inspection. You got to understand what you're talking about. But I've had several instances where we were not asking for a lot, and it seemed insurmountable to the seller. So I was representing the buyer, and it seemed insurmountable to the seller because the listing agent, and I hate using this phrase, but like couldn't sell it to the seller. And when I use the word selling, like I don't mean, convince them against their will. What I mean is like really just saying like, hey, Bob, like this is not a big deal. And in the grand scheme of life, a $500 repair versus going back on market and having to redo showings and finding a whole new thing and a whole new loan, that's just not wise. And a good agent will allow a seller to see the forest through the trees and be like, listen, like, yeah, this is just something that scares them. Even if you're right, Bob, about like, this isn't really a repair, but being able to say like, this is going to make the buyer feel comfortable to move forward. These are the types of things that these are the types of like little nitty gritty mechanics that good agents are able to get through. Now there are times when we're just like, this house, I've had multiple occasions where we've inspected and I've said, we're not buying this house. I mean, I've cost myself hundreds of thousands of dollars in commissions by telling people not to buy certain homes. Because I don't want people in them. And honestly, I think it's reckless for the consumer, but also just kind of selfishly, I'm not interested in going and getting a call 3 weeks after settlement and there's some major problem, or that problem that we knew about ended up being like bigger problem. And I don't want to do that. I think that I just don't want that in my life. I have a default setting for like taking care of people, but also I just don't need the stress. And I always keep in touch with my agent or with my clients, but I don't want that type of touching. I want to be like, how's the house? Like, hey, how's that barbecue? Looks like you guys are having a great time. What's going on? What's new? I don't want, hey, that thing we talked about, you said wasn't a big deal, is a huge deal. And now it's going to cost me $15,000 to fix it. That's not something I want. Now, here's another thing why your agent should understand construction. And I'll give you a personal example. We'll call them Danny and Ashley. Danny and Ashley bought a house in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and they ended up going in under contract with no inspections. Now, this house was originally built in 1910, but the entirety of this house burned to the ground except for the foundation, and they replaced the house, full replacement. So it was basically new construction. Ceilings were taller, all the electric was updated, HVAC, roof, window, everything was brand new. We put them in that house a little less than a year ago. Yeah, it was about March of 2025. And what we ended up doing, we did a walk and talk with our inspector, which we've talked about on this podcast before. And we, everything looked fine. Danny calls me back. And I'm thinking either he's gotten transferred for his job, something else is like happening. He's got a referral, wants to ask a question, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that his heat stopped working. Now in Philadelphia, it's been very, very cold. And if you don't have a good heater, it probably was struggling. And it stopped working during one of these really, really cold spells, where it got down to like, there was a high of 17, that got down to like 2 degrees. That's not typical for Philly. So the heaters really have trouble keeping up. And so he called someone off of Google, an HVAC professional, said, you know what? I don't know who the hell installed this thing, but they installed it all wrong. You got about 2 years on life on this thing. And remember, it's only a year old. The house is the entire house built in 1910, but that 1910 house went up into the atmosphere. It is gone and into a dump. So it is a brand new house. So he's basically saying that a year in, he's got 2 more years on a system that should last him 15 to 20. And he was really upset because he's like, listen, what's my recourse with the sellers? Because, it looks like they sold me a piece of shit. And I said, well, it's kind of beyond the expertise of a seller or a listing agent to understand the true mechanics and HVAC, like installation specifications and everything like that. The township should have overseen it or at least gotten a permit for it. And also HVAC people, they like to stand by their work. It's not really typical for HVAC people to put bad systems in. It's just not good for business, right? And so I started asking him more questions. So I kind of got away from that because there's not going to be a whole lot you can do, unfortunately. You can certainly jump up and down, but in the end, I think any seller is going to just probably say, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I'm not an HVAC professional. I need, we just put it in and that was it. So I started asking him questions about what the guy was talking about. And he was saying that the unit outside wasn't elevated. It needs to be at least like 7 to 10 inches off the ground. And I'm thinking of my house. I've got the same unit outside of my house. It's been sitting on the ground since 2019. And so then we started talking about the inside. And he says, yeah, it's all done. It's done all wrong. He says it's like undersized and all this stuff. And I said, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I said, this unit has been fine for a year and now all of a sudden it's not. So I ended up getting him with my HVAC guy. And I said, listen, good rule of thumb. If the house or if anything in the house costs more than about $2,500, you want to get 3 quotes. Unless it's like something like really simple. But an HVAC system, a roof, windows, you're going to buy an appliance, go buy an appliance. It's fine. But like redoing floors, redoing baths, milling your driveway, like that type of stuff. Go get multiple quotes. In this case, we didn't need multiple quotes on the work. I was like, I want to see if this guy got taken for a loop. Danny is not a handy guy. He's has an engineering mind, but he's not a handy guy. And very young, looks younger than he actually is. And I think the HVAC guy who went in there took him for a ride and tried to get a quote, try to get a deal, and try to get a whole new HVAC replacement. And so my guy went in there and he basically said, yeah, the unit could be raised off the ground, but that's not really like hurting your system. There was a couple like valves or something in the unit that needed to be replaced. I don't think they were like tightened down or bolted down quite as much as they needed to be. And it was a $1,200 fix, but he got a quote for $15,000 to replace his HVAC unit. And so it just goes to show, if he hadn't called me or if he had nobody to call, he might have just spent the $15,000. Now, I think in the end, if he hadn't had me to call, he would have probably maybe gotten another quote. Ashley might have made him get another quote. But because I have the experience in construction, I'm thinking to myself, it's very, very hard for the type of unit that he had installed to kind of conk out after 3 years. It just wouldn't work. If something was that bad, it just wouldn't work. They're not designed to run that terribly to take basically 90% of the operating life of the unit off, out. So It's really, and I don't say all this to toot my own horn, but it's like you have to understand construction. You have to understand maintenance. Your agent should be going to inspections. Your agent also should be asking questions as the inspector goes, not only for the house and the client itself, but that's an education. I tell all my agents, like, you don't want to miss an inspection, man. That's like a treasure trove. Every time I go to one, so I've been on hundreds of inspections. Every time I learn something new because every house is different, every client is different, and every client asks different kinds of questions. And depending on the inspector and what they think is important, I ask questions. Another example of how having a construction background helps your client. We had a house in Philadelphia. It's barely Philadelphia. It's kind of suburban Philadelphia, but it isn't within the limits. We sold the house during one of these big snowstorms, and up in the backyard, they couldn't get there because there was like a foot and a half of snow. There were pipes sticking out of the ground. Now, when there's pipes sticking out of the ground, it usually means that there's a tank underneath because it's venting, right? And there's like a fill line and a vent. During the walkthrough, right before settlement, the buyers went up there and to look at the yard, and there were these pipes sticking out of the ground. Meanwhile, I get a call from the buyer's agent. She's like, I don't think there's anything there because it wouldn't make any sense, but like, I can't verify that there is or is not a tank there. And I used to put sewer laterals in the ground. I used to put utilities in the ground. I've run, a 480 4-phase, like heavy duty electric and Schedule 80 conduit. And if you don't know what that means, that's fine. But like I'm an operator. I was an operator. I backhoe, excavator, and I know largely what went in the ground when in the 20th century. And I know they didn't put oil tanks on the ground in Philadelphia in the 50s because that's when this house was built. But I had to get on with 3 septic people. I had to get on with 2 septic installers because there was a worry that maybe it was a septic tank, but it didn't make any sense because it sat above the property. And then I got on with 2 or 3 HVAC people, and I called like the local old school HVAC company in that area. And they're like, they didn't bury tanks. But in the end, the buyer was worried and they were not going to settle unless they knew that there was a tank back there. If there's a tank in the ground and it goes defunct, it can leach into the aquifer. It can become an environmental problem. It can cost tens of thousands of dollars to remediate and do the environmental testing and all the cleanup. So I didn't really blame them for that, but I was able to get a radar. So it's called ground. It's like ground radar, and it looks like a lawnmower. And they literally run it across the ground, and it scans like up to like 15 feet into the ground to see if there's anything. And I had them out there the next day. I got very lucky. Had them out there the next day, got it all verified. But I was asking him questions the entire time. I asked him, like, how does this machine work? What does it like do? How reliable is it? Like, I was peppering him with questions. And whenever I see contractors, especially like septic inspectors, I always go to septic inspections because those septic people are interested in telling you about what they're doing most of the time. You got to talk about their family sometimes. Septic people are a little fudgy. They're a little nudgy. You have to imagine you're inspecting shit tanks all day. You're not in a great mood. But I always ask, like, how, like, so that baffle, okay, so the tank, the baffle, and then the drain field. And then, like, if we're in an older area, it's like, is this did they put cesspools back here at some point? You just like ask them about and talk shop. I have a septic inspector on the main line who can literally pull up to any house and he knows what system's in the ground because he has been doing it for 40 years and he knows what's in the ground. He knew all the Department of Health people back in the day. So your agent should be curious. They should be asking questions about things and making sure and verifying with the inspector that the things that are like, is that a problem? A lot of agents are just like, oh, okay, no, okay. I always ask because I don't want them worried about something in the inspection report, or when we do get the inspection report, we know what that is. because it gets scary when you get like a 75-page, inspection report, and most of it's benign and just saying, yes, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. But it adds up in the mind of the buyer. And most of these houses are in good shape because people don't list houses that are pieces of shit. And if they are pieces of shit, you don't need an inspection to know they're pieces of shit because you can usually tell. So I hope you guys find that helpful. This is like one of the mountains or one of the hills I'll die on, is that if your agent doesn't understand construction and doesn't understand like kind of what is in a house and can't explain to you what everything is, that's like a kind of a big red flag. And not just because they should know it, but it's because they will not have the leverage or the expertise or the ability to use their words to convey to the other side during a negotiation about either the importance of it, or like if you hire them to sell your house, being able to like kind of dispel concerns about certain things. And so they should know the language of construction, of components, of environmental, mechanical, foundational. So hope you guys find that helpful and have a great day.